Good evening, everybody. This is another episode of Effed and tonight we'll be delving into the very scary topic of demonic possession. But of course, before we get into that, I actually have some stories that were sent in by you fans out there, which is greatly appreciated, and I hope that you listening will enjoy those stories as well. So the first story comes from a person named Jesse. And I titled the story "The House of Angry Spirits." You can find it on the www.effedupstories.com website. But I'm going to read it to you here now. So he says, "Hi guys, I love listening to your podcast on YouTube, and I have a story of my family that I can share. My name is Jesse, and I am from Australia. I was born in England about 7 years before I was born, 1983 to 1984. I was born in 1990. My mom's side of the family went to a close friend's place in southern England, and the house was so big that it was actually split into two separate houses. They let my relatives, which consisted of my grandparents, my mom, and her two brothers, into the house next door, which was newly vacant due to weird occurrences happening over a span of a year to an elderly couple. My grandparents thought that they were pretty crazy and thought nothing of it until they all moved in and got settled. I remember my grandmother telling me of a constant eerie feeling like you were constantly being watched, that feeling was always there, and weird things happening during the night, including chairs being tipped over silently while everyone was being fast asleep, and also beds in the spare rooms being all messed up and the mattresses put on the floor. And at the time, my grandparents thought it was a practical joke being played out by her friends next door, seeing as though they had a set of keys, until she confronted them the next morning, and they gave an honest answer saying that it was not them. The next day, they got the chance to fully explore the house, and on the floor where there was a door at the end of the hallway, which was supposedly the room where a man had committed suicide. Just 1 second, I'm losing my spot here. Anyway, due to the fact that his wife and two children were killed during the Blitz in Plymouth, would not Plymouth. The Blitz in Plymouth would not open. Okay, I think there's a couple words missing here, but anyway, would not open no matter how much strength you would use against it. My grandfather told me he tried kicking it in and it wouldn't even budge. So that same night, my grandparents could hear the door opening and closing, but when they got up to investigate, it was closed. And on the same night, my mother woke up during the night to go to the bathroom. And as she was washing her hands, she saw two faint, transparent people in the reflection of the mirror of a father and a young daughter staring back at her. His mom then screamed and ran right to his grandparents' room, waking them up. They just hushed and calmed her down and didn't really believe her story. And by the way, I realized I just jumped from the third person to the third person here. That's because I'm just reading it and I got it messed up. But anyway, I'm going to continue from the third point of view here from here on out. So the next night, his two uncles, ages 8 and 10, who at the time were sharing a room, were jumping around from bed to bed playing, when all of a sudden a log comes rolling out of the fireplace onto the hardwood floor. They screamed out to their grandmother, worrying that a fire was about to start, so she quickly ran over to their aid and saw the log ooze out a thick red liquid, putting out the flame. She quickly grabbed a sample and cleaned up the mess. I gotta say, that's pretty weird, hey? Like a thick ooze.
Yeah, typically with spiritual phenomena is known as ectoplasm,
Yes,
a
yes.
physical manifestation of spiritual activity.
Yeah, so although ectoplasm, at least in pictures I've seen, have been white, but nevertheless, the next morning she took the sample to the local doctor and asked to have the sample tested to see if it was human blood. The doctor said she would have to wait a week or so to have the results and to come back from a pathologist. So she gave them their home address and the phone number, knowing that they were going to be back home by the time that the tests were ready anyway. So the same night, his grandfather went to bed early due to suffering from like a migraine, which I can empathize with. His grandmother agreed to watch after his mom and his two uncles while they were playing in the living room. And about an hour and a half after his grandfather retreated to his room, his grandmother could hear a lot of traffic moving and banging on the walls coming from the bedroom. So she quickly ran up to the room to see, if she could see her grandfather or whatever. And she could see him gasping for air on the floor. So she quickly screamed and asked, like, what's wrong? And he said something was choking his neck. And he couldn't see who it was, but he could feel two hands around his neck. And the grandmother then noticed marks and bleeding around his neck area. After that, then they quickly gathered their kids and possessions and left the house and notified her friends. So then they left for good, went back home to London, and about a week later, a telegram arrives in the mailbox, which were the test results. They concluded that they were human blood, and the grandmother to this day still has the letter, and the guy, Jesse, telling the story, said he himself has seen the letter on numerous occasions. And his grandmother also told him that in 1993 the house burnt down. When the fire services were fighting the blaze, they could see a figure of a person burning to death silently. After searching for evidence, they couldn't find anything. So that's a pretty neat story, I think. So basically, to summarize the story, we have a family who have been attacked, like his grandfather was attacked physically, choked by, I would assume, a poltergeist.
Well, it sounds to me your textbook poltergeist infestation or manifestation. You have a lot of the times with poltergeist, for whatever reason, there's an association with children. You have objects, moving about, strange presences.
Well, personally, I found the log with the conclusively determined human blood oozing out of it to be a unique element to this story, because it's not something.
Well, that in itself, I can't say I've ever heard of a spirit being able to manifest, you know, human blood that was at least able to be later determined to be human blood. I guess the idea of statues bleeding and paintings crying blood, blood oozing out of walls. I suppose
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of, like The Shining.
Yeah,
Or
it's a hallmark of hauntings. It definitely would give indication of a pretty clear indication of a paranormal event. A log rolling out of a fire. Well, the fire burnt the log. The log rolled out when as the ashes shifted. But be the argument you can make there. But I don't know if there's much you could really say for blood oozing out of a burning log.
Yeah, it's it's an interesting story anyway.
Well, either way, thank you very much, Jesse. It was a very interesting story.
Yes, I enjoyed it, and I hope I didn't ruin it by the way I told it. I have a hard time seeing the screen from where I'm sitting, so it's that, and I just jumped from first person to third person. But hopefully you all.
Well, for anybody who wants a much more coherent version
Yes,
of that
just read
story,
it on the website.
effedupstories.com.
Yeah. So moving on, we have a story from. Actually, this specific person has sent me a couple stories now, and I feel like I told one of these already, but yeah. So I'm gonna jump to a newer one. Actually, I'm pretty sure I told one of these, but anyway. He's a person, if you guys have heard our last podcast, which is when I believe I told it, he has very vivid dreams to the point where he can smell in his dream. He has a sense of touch, place. When people speak, they're very clear and concise. And like when he wakes up, it's as if he's been there. He claims to have had dreams of the past, present, future, and basically has been revealed information that he has no way of knowing. So he wrote me just last night, actually, a story that, again, involving his dreams, where, to summarize, he had gone to sleep 3 times. three separate times that night because he would awake because of what was going on. And when he awoken, he would always be in the same place with the same people. And these people actually, like the first time that he'd woken up, uh, and went back to sleep and was back there, it's like the people even said to him, like, "Where did you go?" Blah blah blah, as if he had been phasing in and out of reality. So he's convinced that he's traveling either in space and time or to the future. But what he said was that this was supposedly the future. And I should mention that, and we're going to call him John because I believe that's what I called him last time as a pseudonym. He's a machinist. Like he works with machinery, creating things. He's very good with construction of items, like not to say build a house items, but like machinery and stuff like that. So anyway, that's one of the things that he always takes notice of, it being his trade, right? And so he said this was well into the future, he said, because he could notice, for one thing, the setting was like underground in like a cave system. Everybody lived underground, and he got the impression it was from, like there was radiation about. So it almost gave the impression that it was from like a nuclear disaster. And he said that the plumbing and the just the way everything worked, like the infrastructure down there, was very advanced and different than what we have in today's world. And I can't explain this better because I know nothing of it. But he said that it actually would work, and it's different, far different from, is more efficient than what we have today. But anyway, the thing that really drove home, I guess, is or made his story kind of pretty interesting, was that he had reached a point where they had a sewage system, but it was different. Like they had chemists on board who would they used chemicals to get rid of this stuff. It's like they couldn't get to the surface, so they had to deal with this underground, right? So they had to have chemicals that would eat away waste, basically. And he somehow got some of this chemical on his back, and it burned him. And when he woke up, apparently, even now, he still has that burn on his back. So that, that's something where you, like, how do you say that's in your head, right? When you're having physical markings left behind. Now, what's your thought on that, Ryan?
Well, I mean, I guess the argument can be made that the mind is a mysterious and wonderful creation of nature, and that the mind is so powerful that it can actually cause, the physical manifestation of injury upon somebody's body. Um, but that's just plain devil's advocate. I'm not sure if I 100% believe that that's the case. But I think if I woke up with chemical burns on my back after dreaming about being burned by chemicals, I'd have a lot of appreciation for all the information that preceded that event. Um, I
Well,
guess it's something to think about for all of us. How much truth is there to a dream? What is a dream? I guess for myself, I've studied. I've read the works of Dr. Jung, and specifically about dreams. I can't say that I'm in 100% agreement with Jung or any other psychologist. I feel that dreams still kind of fall outside of that realm of complete scientific understanding. It's one of the few modern mysteries we still have. And for any of you out there who experience such things as prophetic dreams, please send it in. It's a very interesting aspect of this world that we live in. And I mean, let's face it, times have never been so on shore as they are right now. So any information that you could share about the future, I'm sure all the listeners out there would appreciate it. So I guess, according to this individual, anyways, we have a rather grim future to look forward to.
Yes, and it's actually that particular future I think has been fictionalized in movies and games. I'm sure I've seen episodes or played games with a similar outcome.
Well, I think a Fallout would be an
Yeah,
extremely
or
popular
or
example.
Metro 2033,
Metro 2033.
and what else?
Well, it's simply going and and looking through any kind of popular culture these days, whether it be video games or books or even conspiracy shows. Jesse Ventura's conspiracy show, in which if anybody who's seen the episode or wants to see the episode, there's a episode about 2012 and a coming cataclysm, possibly during around that time, which the world governments have been preparing for by building deep underground, some call military bases,
Or
acronym
DUMBs.
DUMB, DUMBs, or just deep underground survivalist facilities. And I mean, there's entire organizations out there, construction companies. That's what they do. They buy decommissioned missile silos and convert them into what they call survivalist condos. So I guess ultimately it's up to the individual how much stock you want to put into a such an apocalyptic worldview. But if things continue the way they are, who knows?
Yeah, it's kind of a scary thought. But that being said, I think it's time that we dive into the
Another
meat.
different scary thought.
I'll admit that this is something that I personally find scary. Of course, loss of control is always a scary topic to me in particular anyway, but of course I speak of demonic possession. So I'm sure all of you have seen movies like The Exorcist and The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and they're popular horror movies, and because they scare. But I'm not sure how many people are aware of the fact that these movies were based on real events, and that's basically the starting point here. We actually did some research trying to find some more unknown examples of demonic possession and things like that, so that to give you a different look at some of these stories. But so let's just dive right into that here. I got a couple of stories and a couple of topics for discussion here. And of course, if any of you listeners out there have had experiences with either demonic possession or just anything in that realm, whether you awoken an angry spirit with a Ouija board or whatever, send that in to us, because I'd love to discuss it on the show. And you can send it to will@effedupstories.com or ryan@effedupstories.com. That's effedupstories.com. So, do you want to go first, Ryan, or shall I?
Well, I mean, I guess to start, you mentioned two very famous cases. We have the Exorcist and the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Now, of course, The Exorcist was inspired by a young boy named Robert, I do believe. And for those of you who are really interested in the story, and I personally believe that the true story of the Exorcist was based off of is much more terrifying and much more interesting than the Hollywood version. I guess just to kind of touch on the main points. The boy was plagued with what were thought to be epileptic fits. He was taken to a hospital. They attempted to treat him. the treatment wasn't going well, and eventually, because of the spiritual activity that was taking place, and when I say spiritual activity, I guess to be more concise, the movement of objects. There were priests and doctors who observed the boy's bed moving violently as if there was, a half a dozen people under there kicking and punching under the mattress. Objects would fly across the room. In fact, one of the professionals, I'm not sure if it was a doctor, I believe it was a doctor of psychology, had the boy get the permission from his parents and had the boy stay at his place. And, he put the kid in the bed, and again, the same thing was happening with the mattress, the bed shaking and bouncing. So he moved the boy into the living room of the house, put the mattress on the floor, in which he reported, actually in a letter that he wrote to a priest, that the mattress slid across the floor with the boy on it, as if somebody was pushing or pulling it effortlessly across the floor. Once the exorcisms actually started, of course, demonic voices began, coming through the boy, speaking in tongues. He would reportedly, with his eyes clenched shut and covered with a cloth, because for whatever reason, I guess they covered his eyes. He would still spit at them and hit them like right in the face from 5 feet away, and then he would laugh and say, "Got you with a good one there, didn't I, Father?"
Nice.
With, again, I guess the hallmarks of demon possession. One of the hallmarks is the possessed person in question, or the supposed possessed person would, as one of the hallmarks, would have knowledge of events that they would not otherwise be able to know. And as the story continued, ultimately the demon was cast out on Easter Monday, after a lengthy period of months. And interestingly enough, at the end of the exorcism ritual, it was reported by the priests who were involved. Well, it was just one priest involved. The other was a Jesuit who was not yet fully had not yet fully taken his vows. However, the final report being that at the very end of the exorcism, that the archangel Michael actually took possession of the child, and he called out in a very clear and commanding voice that the demon must vacate this boy, and that it was a vessel of the Lord, and would be cast out. Now, interestingly enough, historically, the most successful rituals used out of the I believe the book is called The Roman Rite, or the Roman Rituals, which is where the exorcism rituals come from. The most useful ones of that kind, or the most useful ritual in that book are the rituals dedicated to Saint Michael.
That's interesting that you say that, and I mention only because recently, for whatever reason, my sister started getting really religious, and she always brings up Archangel Michael as as like a protector.
He's the chief of the angels,
Okay.
supposedly. I guess for the purposes of this conversation, obviously we're assuming that demons are real entities, real beings. Basically, I guess we could refer to them. They are negative, non-human intelligences. Excuse me. And I guess if we're going to allow for the existence of demons, then that
You
allows
have
for the
to.
existence of Satan, as well as God and angels. So while I'm not necessarily of the belief that all these things are 100% true, For the purposes of our conversation today, I guess
We'll assume them to be true.
we'll assume them to be true. As the I mean, we're looking at possession. Possession is an extremely broad, widespread phenomenon. We're talking about something that is, as far as we know, has been with us as a species probably since the advent of spirituality, since the first men looked up at the stars and the sun and the
Well,
moon, and
it's even been documented in the first religious doctrines. Like they didn't like they detailed an exorcism, but they didn't explain exactly what they did to drive out the spirits.
yes,
But like it has been mentioned. So I think it's important to kind of clarify what some of the signs are that someone is possessed, because these are pretty universal to all stories everywhere.
because obviously in the modern world, you see somebody shaking and raving and growling and frothing at the mouth, their
You think
eyes rolling
crazy.
up in their heads. You're thinking this person obviously is mentally disturbed or has some sort of a brain condition or a
But there are
nervous system problem
yes, but there are things that are
unique to the
yes.
demon possession phenomenon.
So let's just run through a quick list here. I mean, first we got the obvious change in attitude. They can change from being very happy-go-lucky people to very irritable, very angry, just a negative change in attitude, or maybe they're just spacey. Whatever the case is an obvious change.
And even in some cases, you could see a very shy, timid person suddenly become very bold and loud and charismatic.
Yes, well, and another thing about these people is that they tend to have extreme mood swings from like calm and withdrawn to angry and violent. They also may seem to have multiple personalities, where one personality is, caring, happy, whatever, and the next personality is like a total opposite side of the fence.
Like in the case of Annalise Mitchell, which is the real Emily Rose from the Exorcism of Emily Rose, who reportedly housed dozens of demonic entities, including the demons who dwelt in Hitler and Nero, in Judas, Belial, Satan, were all claimed to have been inhabitants of Annalise Mitchell. But please
That
continue.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. We're going to get to that later, in where many people have been possessed by many spirits, or sorry, demons. But yeah, moving on our list here, their voice, you hear this all the time, and you see it in the movies. Their voices often change from high to low to guttural, and they often speak in foreign languages unknown to them, or in tongues. And actually, two languages that are very often spoken are Spanish
In Latin.
and Latin. And so and that's something I want to discuss later as well. They also, as mentioned earlier, they may have the ability to read into the past, present, and future to get information that they have no access to, and they often use that almost as if to tease whoever they're playing with at the time. They can possess superhuman strength. I mean, one example of that was I came across a video, and I gotta admit, when you come across things that for all intents and purposes, they look legit. I mean, it's pretty scary looking, actually. But there was these priests. It was subtitled because they spoke a different language. But you remember the chair in Constantine,
The
right?
one with all the straps and buckles.
Yeah. Well, that's what it reminded me of. Just because, well, actually, someone meant to, put a comment there about that, and I was like, oh yeah, so it does. But anyway, they had it was more like a desk, but it was a chair attached to a desk, and these priests would exercise like they had basically people, because one exorcism is not enough. It's usually like a treatment over a period of time.
Yes.
And so there was like this one girl that they had, and they strap her around the ankles, around I think the thighs, the waist, the arms and the wrists, and even like the upper body, I think. And anyway, they had these metal locking mechanisms, and one of these girls was able to break the metal locking mechanism. Right? I mean, put that in perspective for a second. So I guess that's what we're talking about when we talk about superhuman strength.
Feats of strength and feats of abnormal feats of a physical nature. I know, just as another example, there was a man, this was a modern example. I'm sure this individual is still alive today. Apparently, he's been successfully exorcised, but because of his violent violent activity that he was taking part in, he ended up getting arrested. And while in his jail cell, they came to check on him, and he had his head and his arm up to his shoulder, out through that little tiny rectangular slot that's in the door, to pass the food through. He had
Yep.
managed to wedge his head and his arm up to his shoulder out, and that's what was hanging out of the door when they came and checked on him. And he had to be sedated and greased up and pulled back through.
Wow. That's pretty far out. So yeah, we're talking not normal here.
Well, very extremely abnormal feats of a physical nature, whether that be strength or dexterity or even endurance.
Yes.
Also, another activity that's in the same category would be that these people have a tendency to jump or snap themselves up off the floor, while they're lying flat on the floor, and their body jerks so violently that they fly up into the air.
Now that would be something to see. So again, like these are things, and they're signs, and yeah, you could, I guess, for some of these, you could attribute it to something else. But a couple of things that can happen that are way harder to explain are that they may get wounds, lesions, bite marks, or whatever right in front of your eyes by an invisible entity. Like we're talking like you're looking at the person, they're normal, and three deep scratch marks right into the body, right in front of your eyes. And this has been reported by multiple witnesses to possessed individuals.
Which in fact was a very prominent thing during the exorcism of the young boy, which the Exorcist was based off of, right in front of the priest's eyes. And I mean, you can find video testimony of this from the priest himself, who was there. That very clear red cuts appeared across the stomach and abdomen of the boy while they were performing the exorcism. And of course, these scratches would always appear in groups of three, reportedly in mocking of the Trinity.
And on that note, because our good friend Ryan here actually spooked me out a little bit while we were doing this stuff, because we have a history of kind of digging where we're not supposed to be digging. And this is one of those things. I've always been interested in the, well, not just paranormal things, but like demonology and stuff like that. And in fact, me and Ryan actually have a past of, what's the word? We were messing around where we shouldn't be messing. And we have some bad experiences from that. So I'm extra careful now when I go and do this kind of thing. And even researching this stuff, I'll be honest, puts me a little on edge, because just the very knowledge sometimes is enough to make a link. But
Well, how does the saying goes? Be careful how hard you stare into the abyss. You might just find it staring back.
there you go. So in to go with the line of mocking of the tritone, I'm sure some of you are aware I'm a musician, so I play guitar pretty regularly. I never break strings, and I change them pretty regularly as well. like it's just something that doesn't happen to me. I've been playing for what 10, 16 or 17 years.
Yeah, at
So
least.
yeah, so I got a long history, and like I said, I've been playing pretty much every day for a while, especially because I'm working on a new album. But anyway, I digress. While doing this research, right after delving into it, I was taking a break. I went to play my acoustic guitar, and I was in the middle of playing something, and I busted a string. And it was the third one down from the top, and I was still having my coffee. I kind of like to sing and play. So I was like, screw it. I can still play mostly what I'm doing, right? Without that string. So I was just going to play until I finished my coffee. I strum another couple chords, I break another string. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like this. I've never broken two strings like that, especially within seconds of each other. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to put this up. But I still want to play, so I grabbed my electric. And I usually don't grab for it first if I'm just playing because I'm lazy and I gotta plug it in and everything. But anyway, I did, and I kid you not, within a couple of strums, I broke another string, and I just thought it was weird. I actually uh, asked my brother if he had I don't know, filed my guitar strings or done something to it or put water on it to rust them in certain points or something. Knowing he really wasn't gonna have done it, but like I just thought it was weird. And then I was talking to Ryan, and I mentioned it to him, and that's when he told me about the tritone thing,
Well, the mocking of the Trinity.
the mocking of the Trinity, and I was like, yeah, that's great. And and Ryan himself that week of you know doing this research almost got in two fistfights at work, which doesn't happen.
And a third while I was commuting.
Really?
Yep.
So there you go. There's your three right there. So, and that's new to me because I just heard about the first two. So,
I was on my way home on Friday.
that's well. What happened there? What was the story with that?
Well, just somebody cut me off in traffic and then proceeded to flip me off after cutting me off. And of course, I had words with them. They had words with me. The individual got out of their vehicle. I got out of mine. Exchanged more words. The lights changed. And I mean, not to be too full of myself, but I'm a pretty big guy, and I really wasn't too worried about this guy. He's some little skinny mouthpiece, and it was like suddenly realized of what he was doing and what was about to happen, and he hopped back in his car and took off without holding up traffic very long.
Well, there you go. That's pretty wild. And again, like I know you guys don't know Ryan, but I know him, and he's a pretty, for the most part, a hermit. He doesn't look for trouble. He just doesn't fight. It's not something that's normal. So again, to have it happen during the week of, and you got three. We got threes here. If you want
Needless to say, it was a one of those moments where you're wondering.
and again, like maybe it's silly. We're just playing with numbers, and that wouldn't be, that wouldn't be unlikely either. But nevertheless, I guess I'm aware of it because I'm doing it. Like I'm conscious of it.
And
So
well, personally, I'm not a big believer in coincidences. And like you said, it's not a. I've been living in this city now for 7 years, and I can't say that I've had very many confrontations with people, and to have three altercations that almost became physical in 1 week while I was researching this stuff and getting material together for this podcast.
Well,
It was
by
interesting.
comparison, yours was much worse than mine. I just well, then again, though, you never actually got in a fight. Now I got to go buy 2 packs of strings. So,
Yeah, well,
so
I guess it's all perspective. Three guitar strings broken for somebody who doesn't play guitar, not a big deal. But for a musician, a bit of a different story.
yeah, like I said, I've never had that happen before. But anyway, so that's the Trinity effect that we're talking about. Now we'll move on to a couple more signs here.
Well, the
Um,
eyes, I think, is one that comes up a lot.
okay, we'll discuss that because I don't have that on my list.
Really, from one that I came across in several different places, and I'm not sure if this comes out of the Exorcist handbook, which I believe is called the Roman Rituals or the Roman Rite. Um, there's talk of eye dilation, and that the human eye, even under certain psychological, people have certain psychological problems or neurological disorders, the human eye can dilate to a pretty extreme degree. I mean, for anybody who's seen somebody under the effect of psilocybin mushrooms or some other psychotropic substances, could attest to that the dilation of the human pupil is can be rather extreme.
Do,
However, in some demonic cases, the dilation has gone beyond what is typically accepted as the human limits for the dilation of an iris. And is one of the few, I guess, medically verifiable conditions or side effects of being possessed is the person's eye dilates beyond that of which a human eye should be able to dilate.
well, not to say it's the same thing, but do you know? And I've never done mushrooms or any psychedelic drugs, but I have been asked before if I had, in fact, done mushrooms because my pupils naturally are dilated out a lot, and I just attribute it to the fact that I can't. My eyes aren't great. I mean, I'm not blind or anything, but they're not great. So I figure they have to open up a lot to get the light in. But my pupils are naturally like I'd say between a dime and a nickel most of the time.
That's
Yeah,
pretty significant.
yeah, it's pretty. Not that I think I'm possessed either. Hopefully,
Well, perhaps, like you said, is perhaps it's something to do with spending a lot of time inside.
yeah, that and the fact I'm a night owl. So one of the other things that is a dead giveaway that we're not talking about a mental patient, but something more, is when a possessed person has environmental factors around them, like objects levitating or doors opening and closing, things flying around the room. These are things that, if anything, would make the witnesses crazy. It's you can't attribute that to a crazy person. That's beyond our scope of reason.
Well, falls into the realm of the supernatural. Then,
And it follows these people. It follows the possessed people. Wherever they go, this phenomenon goes with them. And I guess the other more obvious, the more obvious attribute here is that these people may start to have an aversion to religious objects, such as crucifixes, or anything religious for that matter. It's like they're terrified of it. They don't want to touch it. It's like poison to them. So I guess if you start to see people acting like that, then there could be something more to it. Now, of course, I will say, and I think I've told you this before, Ryan. For whatever reason, I kind of find churches creepy,
yeah.
but I can go in them. Like it doesn't freak me out or anything like that. I just find something about the whole building kind of and the atmosphere and stuff kind of creepy, almost cult like, maybe.
It'd be interesting because in a lot of my readings, of course, we're looking at possession in from the perspective of a Judeo-Christian worldview.
And even Roman Catholic, for that matter.
Well, yeah, and I mean that falls under the Jew. I mean, the Catholic Church is obviously the comes to mind first when talking about possession, because if I'm not mistaken, it's the only really mainstream denomination of Christianity that still acknowledges the existence of demonic possession, even though the church itself has now taken a stance that the devil is not a real person, but simply a metaphor for the evil that men are capable of. And I guess depending on how devout you are, that could be an indication of the church itself losing faith. And in these days, I know I've spoken to many very religious people, some of which I guess would be classified as the fringe, who believe that the end times are indeed upon us.
Yeah, and we've got plenty of signs, but I mean, this is something we could do a whole episode on by itself.
Oh, definitely.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a short break because I got some stories. We have lots of stuff to discuss, actually. So we're going to take a break, and I'm going to play my track Disinterment off my Ethereal album. And it's fitting because that song is about messing, or I should say, digging where you shouldn't be digging. So we'll be back soon. And we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. If so, you can check out more of my music at www.doortoanima.com. That's doortoanima.com. And we're back with more demonic possession. So I have a couple of stories here. One of which I'm going to save my best one for last. But one of these ones that was pretty interesting. It has a certain factor in it that I find interesting, and this is a theme amongst a lot of possession cases. In that, I find a lot of people who get possessed or get involved with it are religious people, like more religious than normal people. You know, they're heavily involved with church and stuff like that. So this actually comes from a French province, and so I apologize if I don't pronounce this. I know I'm not going to pronounce these things, like the names of the places, properly, because I don't know French. But anyway, the name of this province was Aix province, so I'll just spell that out the way they have it. It's AIX-EN province. And what makes it special is that the possessions involve a priest and nuns. So these are the least of which kind of people you would expect to get possessed or even dabble in, demonic rituals and things of that ilk. So this was all said to have happened back in the year 1611. A priest by the name of Louis Godfrey was said to have made a pact with the devil. Apparently, Louis had become lovers with this 17-year-old Ursuline nun. So I guess Ursuline was a sect of the nuns, and her name was Madeline, and she suffered from depression. So once the rumor got out that Madeline, was having this relationship with this much older man, Madeline was admitted to the Ursuline convent, where she gave the whole story to Mother de Gamer. So once this all came out, it was decided that they needed to keep Madeline safe from Louis, so Madeline was transferred to a distant convent at AIX. Apparently, 2 years after the transfer, Madeline got possessed. So those around her said that her body would contort into like these gross formations, like in these weird angles and stuff, and she had extreme anger, outbursts and mood swings. And one day she went ballistic and broke a crucifix, which, I mean, you can imagine even back in like the early 1900s, like that kind of stuff is like, extreme blasphemy to folks back then were generally really religious and stuff like that. So after this episode, the convent started performing exorcisms on Madeline, but of course they had no effect. So as the problems continued, people started accusing Father Godfrey of devil worship. Like, it all came back to this guy of whom she had this relationship with prior, to her coming out here. And, they placed the blame on Madeline's affliction on him. So by the end of the year, 8 more nuns from that convent had been possessed. And so this whole thing led to other priests and exorcists getting involved. Through it all, Godfrey supposedly said something that amounted to a confession to one of these priests. And one of the possessed nuns accused him of committing every kind of sexual perversion, which again is like extremely taboo, especially back then. Today is probably pretty normal. But anyway, so Godfrey ended up in court over this whole thing in AIX. And Father Godfrey spent some time in prison, where he was tortured and shaved to find marks of the devil, 3 of which were found and used against him in court. They also got a confession out of him through torture, in which he claims to have poisoned over 1,000 people with his words. So he had Madeline marked on her head, belly, legs, thighs, and her feet. After the court has heard, this whole thing, Madeline actually attempted suicide twice. Also produced in court was a pact with an actual letter, a pact with the devil, signed by Godfrey in his own blood. Apparently, Godfrey actually made a pact with Satan to get power over women, so it explains why, these are the people who got possessed, basically. Father Godfrey was sentenced to execution, First, he was tortured by strappado, which is when a victim's hands are tied behind their back and their their hands are tied behind their back and they're lifted to the air by a rope attached to the wrist, which discolates the arms. He was also tortured by squassation, where the hands are tied in front and hung by the hands while the ankles are tied to a heavy weight, which damages the arms, legs, and hips. And Gaddafi was still alive after this torture, so archers dragged him through the streets for 5 hours until they arrived at the location of execution where Gaddafi was strangled and his body burned to ashes. So I guess what made that story so extreme, I guess, like, religion is like the polar opposite of you know, Satanism and demonology and stuff like that. Like, it's the other team. You know, you got two teams playing. This is the other team, and here we have a person on this team who secretly goes to work for the other team to spread, you know, the very wrong, you know, negative and bad things, and performing bad things to his own people, you know, which were also religious. And of course, that's the key here, is that we're talking about religious people dabbling and getting involved in, you know, the opposite of what they should be playing with.
Well, I guess ultimately we're talking about the oldest story, good versus evil, and once we get into demonic possessions, and especially those dealing directly with the possession of religious people, I guess the theme of spiritual warfare really starts to come out, because in any war, you have deserters, you have turncoats, you have traitors, you have spies, you have double agents. And I know myself, years ago, I read an article written about a book that was published as being fiction, but according to the author, it was actually nonfiction. And the author, in fact, was a I'm not sure if he was a bishop or a cardinal, but he went on, like, the book was about satanic cults within the Vatican.
Now that's interesting.
And the idea that this war, this battle has waged itself right up to the walls of the Vatican and has now spilled into the Vatican itself, and that there are members who take their vows. It's all a lie. Meanwhile, they are the chief leaders, or they are members of satanic covens that operate in secret and actually hold satanic rituals under the roof of churches within Vatican City.